Today we're going to kind of an alien planet for me also. This is kind of an alternate universe. Um, the graffiti world, the world of street art, um, is something that I'm not real familiar with. So this was a quick study. Um, Art history for the graffiti world started maybe in the late 60s, early 70s. Street art tagging, graffiti. OSGEMEOS means twins. So Octavio and Gustavo Pandolfo are a pair of graffiti artists, but they're really muralists. It has evolved from tagging into something which is quite remarkable. Um, this year-long full floor exhibit of approximately 1,000 artworks, photographs, archival materials highlights their collaborative, multidisciplinary practice, including the roots of their fantastical artistic language, inspired by their upbringing in urban Brazil. Os Gêmeos, which translates to twins, will spotlight the artist's playful combination of universal themes with magical elements drawn from their heritage, urban art, graffiti, folk art, um, and Walt Disney, as far as I'm concerned, and their shared imagination. These guys work together, but I'll talk a lot more about that. They come out of this graffiti movement. It started in the 60s. There's a crossover between street art into the galleries in the 80s, with artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring and a bunch of others. Um, and the development of this kind of contemporary mural movement, which is quite remarkable. Um, so the Pandolfo brothers were born in 1974 into a family of artists and art lovers in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Brazil's most populous city. As kids, they spent their free time breakdancing, DJing, listening to rappers. They also wanted to dress like them. Once they showed their grandmother a photograph of LL Cool J and asked if she could sew them similar outfits, and she did it in 2 days, like crazy. Uh, um, so basically, their graffiti style has gained them recognition throughout Brazil, but they've also kind of integrated this kind of cartoon-like fantasy into their work. Um, oh, wait a minute. There we go. Okay. So they've been drawing and painting together since they were young children. Um, they when someone in an interview asks them which one of you invented the style, they both point at each other and smirk. They work together. They will pass the drawings back and forth and have one will work on something and pass it over to the other one and he'll complete it. It's a very open kind of vision. So they've been working on this for close to 40 years. Their hands don't stop moving. Their unique style, this kind of surreal world, a mix of mythology, politics, the street, and Walt Disney. It's a very interesting. So you see this wall of drawings, and the cabinets full of these little sketches. Um, so this is Zephyr, who is a tagger. These were from, some of them were from Queens, some of them from different places. He's a very well known, well developed graffiti artist, um, and basically these folks travel around the world doing these projects. Now, this guy crosses over from just being kind of a scribbled name to a really highly developed graphic style, and he actually does do graphic art along with doing his uh, tagging and this type of work. But this is kind of the early developments of what um, the brothers would have been seeing. So basically, down on the lower right hand, you see the brothers working, uh, and basically, you can see that they were kind of looking at Basquiat. In fact, you can see, there's a little crown up in the kind of like the left of center in the painting that they're working on, and that crown was one of the things that Basquiat integrated into a bunch of his paintings. And then at the top is a Banksy update on this image, and it's a very, funny but poignant take on an update on Basquiat's work. And this is Futura, another, basically, tagger who made the crossover into the fine art field. Basically, his work was sold in galleries, but also this is the cover for the 1982 Clash album. Um, so at the top, you see one of his train cars that basically he painted. Um, but he did a crossover into um, kind of pop culture design. So he actually designed patterns for Nike and Converse and fashion, out of his tagging roots. And this is a collaboration between Futura 2000 and OSGEMEOS. So basically, you see that there's this quilt, um, uh, of flags that they used for the pants on this character. So there's a kind of universal language that they're trying to develop in this work. Um, and this still exists. This is on West 21st Street. Uh, that's one of the other things that I wanted to talk a little bit about. Basically, um, a lot of these murals are very transitory. They are in in done on buildings, some of which are going to be torn down, some of which are in vacant lots and are going to have a building built up next to them. They get painted over. There's all kinds of stuff that happens here. Actually, there's a whole language that goes with this, and a lot of, I'm going to pull out a few things and talk about some of the ways that people have, the kind of nomenclature that they use for talking about this stuff. Um, among the, this tradition comes out of hip hop, basically breakdancing and hip hop and all that is the inspiration for a lot of the tagging and a lot of the murals that have come out of this. So, you know, basically a tag is a stylized personal signature of a graffiti writer. They call themselves graffiti writers, not painters. They basically, um, and they work in things called crews, a group of graffiti writers that work together, usually in a similar style, and adapt the collective. Basically they'll make up a name for themselves, like the Fantastic Partners. Um, um, OSGEMEOS is their tag, basically. Um, so they will do things like something like they call a bomb, uh, to paint many surfaces with tags or throw ups in a single geographic area. So they'll just blanket an area with imagery. Um, well, okay, you get the idea. There's a whole language that goes with this. That's kind of an interesting shift in how you'd think about it. One of the things that I love about OSGEMEOS is they've developed this kind of um, surreal world. It's kind of part Hieronymus Bosch and part MC Escher. There's a dimensionality to the work. They notice in this full figure that there's a shadow painted behind the figure. As strange as the character is, there's also a dimensionality to the character. Um, okay, here they are working away. Um, Oshimios left their mark on cities around the world. In their studio, they're constantly experimenting with new kinds of mark making. So using different kinds of markers, different approaches, different ideas. Um, and this is part of the Coney Island uh, mural project, which is ongoing. There are approximately 68, as far as I know, right now. I mean, there may be more than that. I may be talking while they're spray painting. Um, but this is a really subtle one for them. I mean, the colors are very muted, but really interesting, kind of strange world, these waves on the bottom and the mix of flowers and characters that repeat themselves in different forms. Um, so Oshimios came in, this was 2005 that they did this one. Okay, Tritres for us is our soul. It's it's our, let's say, parallel world that we live in, lives inside us. Um, so there's this whole, this is all done with spray paint. There's no brushwork in it. Really interesting the kind of detail that they can get out of a spray can. And this is an installation that's in the Hirshhorn exhibition. There's a bunch of these installation pieces that they've gotten into. They work with their brother. They've got another brother that basically does the three-dimensional stuff that they do. They do a lot of well, I'll show you some of the characters. I don't know if this is a sonically activated piece. I have a feeling like it is. It's probably pretty noisy at the Hirshhorn right now. And here we go. So basically, um, this subway car is kind of a homage to the 1980s. Um, they were not active in the 1980s, but here you go. They named it 1980. So this is kind of their roots. Um, the piece on the right is from Milan from 2016. And at first it looks like, oh, it's another piece like that. Except for if you look at the bottom down here and notice this guy walking, and that gives you some idea of the scale of this thing. Let me do a zoom in on this so you can see. There's the scale of this piece. So you can see the stairway going up the side now when I blow it up. So they're up there in buckets painting these things. They're like, they're all over the place. Again, notice the shadow cast on the wall. Um, and the kind of the music, the dancing, the street festa, that aspect of their work is throughout. It's like, from much earlier pieces. So this is a hip hop homage. Basically, this abandoned lots are rare in New York, where every square foot of space is worth big bucks. The exposed walls are prime space for street art. The art that goes up is often most fleeting. As soon as contractors settle on a building agreement, the paint will disappear into the concrete jungle. So here are some detailed shots of this piece, which is quite remarkable. And, a boombox, well, who the heck knows what a boombox is at this stage of the game? Uh, the kids aren't out there on the street with boom boxes any longer. But this is really back to the day when it's kind of like their art history. Um, the days of the 70s when folks were out on the street with boom boxes breakdancing. Okay. And again, as I said, they work in radically different locations. Um, there's this 3D tagger on the right. That's actually, I believe that's located in Sao Paulo. But the piece on the left is a castle in Scotland. Um, they they basically travel to these different places and gather a crew together and do these pieces. And this one's in Boston. Okay. And they've also been hired to paint very different surfaces. So here they are doing a Boeing 737 in 2014. So they've been commissioned to do these things all over the place. So on the left, you see the the beginnings, the drawing phase. You can see the drawn in outlines and the beginning phases of what is a finished piece on the right. And this is in Stockholm. It was done in 2017, pre-pandemic. Um, they actually were, you know, kind of limited during the pandemic to working in the studio, but they took full advantage of that. Okay. And on the bottom, you see the full um, mural. And I pulled out some areas beautifully, actually, they're really beautifully painted. Let me see if I can get my zoom up and go in here and look at some of these a little bit closer and look at you can tell some of it's spray painted and all of that, but it really is gem-like. It's very jewel-like. The way they integrate the texture of the wall into the painting and all of that. And it's a very interesting approach. These things popping out of other things, these half fish, half person, um, part bird, uh, flying flying fish. Uh, and this piece was dedicated to Keith Haring, um, on the corner of Houston and Bowery. Again, very surrealistic stuff. And there's a Keith Haring. This was done, I believe, in 1980. And this one was done, um, let's see, I think it was in the early or mid 2000s. And here we go. These guys are so funny. I mean, basically, they got the dog down there doing a break dance. And that giant boom box. Okay, again, you know, this is a building that's going to be torn down. It's basically they came in, they painted this on there, and it's gone. Um, oh, I see a question up here.
Larry, yeah, somebody
Yes,
said it was cartoonish.
yes, it is very cartoonish. It's Walt Disney on LSD. Uh, you know, I mean, we're talking about there's also this business of these masks that you see a lot of these characters wearing. Well, tagging isn't exactly legal. So a lot of the time they wear masks because of the spray paint, but they also wear masks to prevent being identified. Because in a lot of the cases where they were tagging on trains and things like that, they had to get in there and out of there really quickly or they get busted. So good question. Yes, they are definitely cartoonish. They are, um, underground cartoons, but nonetheless cartoons. This
Larry, somebody said something else. Wait,
okay.
like how this one looks like it's 3D coming out of, oh, it's cartoonish, like how this one looks like it's 3D coming out of the building.
Right. Yeah.
Like his
That
head
whole
is
thing with
coming out. Right.
painting the shadows and all that is something that's really an important part of their work. A lot of other, there's a lot of murals that are going on at this stage of the game. It's big, and a lot of the things are very realistic. They're very sharp edged and all that. These guys play with that. They play with that kind of cast shadow and things like that, saying that this strange creature, this being is three-dimensional and casts a shadow. Uh this, it's hysterical. There's this strong kind of fairy tale quality to these pieces, kind of sci-fi, um and it's a kind of hip hop carnival. It's kind of somewhere between New York City streets and the carnival in Brazil. Uh, Okay, and this is part of the installation that's at the Hirshhorn. Um, and this is relatively recent. These were done in 2023, 2024. These guys are prolific. They are just doing this stuff constantly. Even with the interviews that I've seen where they're talking to somebody on a video, but they're also scribbling in their books at the same time and just cranking these things out. And there's a full view of that installation that's at the Hirshhorn. And as I said, they do have a brother who does a lot of the three-dimensional things, the sculpture, and helps with the construction of these things. Um, and here's another piece where we're going into an alternate world, basically a spaceship, flying fish, this kind of, if you look at the painting back there, it's a creature that popped out of the Hieronymus Bosch painting, this bird beak, but then it's also wearing the crown, which is a reference to Basquiat. So they're kind of playing off of each other. They kind of this is a community around the world, and they work together. They go different places, and they'll gather a crew of these different people in these different locations and work with them. As a matter of fact, let's go back to this one back. uh, One more back. Let's see. Ah, not that. I can't get there. Okay, but they work with different people in different parts of the world, so there's different hands that come into these. The one where I showed you the castle, that actually was worked on by 3 or 4 different tagging groups. And here is one of the brothers, and don't ask me which brother working. Okay, the giants. Now they've done a lot of these giants around the world. This was an enormous set of silos at um, basically the Vancouver kind of art fair. They were commissioned to do something with these buildings. I thought I had the pre shot of these, but I don't think I put it on. Um, but again, these are enormous. They're 50 feet tall. And this is one of their sculptures. They do a lot of these too, and it reminded me of Nikki de Saint Phal's work from the 60s and 70s, where she was doing these giant resin characters. Um, I'm not sure that the materials that the brothers are working with are quite as toxic as the stuff that Nikki de Saint Phal was working with back in the day. But there was a kinship there, and I wanted to pull that out and let you see that. Uh, and they've recently been doing animation. So this actually is a still shot from an animation which they've been working on recently. And if you do get down to the Hirshhorn show, I'm sure that you can see this, but they probably have it online someplace. I'm not quite sure about that. I saw a brief period of this thing in motion, which is kind of interesting. Um, okay. And so um, basically this show is going to be on for a full year. It's running from September 29th until August 2025. Um, there's also going to be a show of Basquiat and Banksy on at the same time at the Hirshhorn. So it's an interesting jump from Banksy, who is still alive and kicking, and Basquiat, and these guys who kind of fill in the space in between. Uh, and there are some Um, there's actually a set of interviews with uh, OSGEMEOS at the Museum of Graffiti, which is a really interesting place to check out. If you Google Museum of Graffiti, they actually do a lot of talks with taggers and graffiti writers and muralists, and they have a two-part talk with OSGEMEOS, which is really interesting. There's also, if you go to the Hirshhorn Museum, um, there's a series of videos that are on there. If you scroll down when you go to OSGEMEOS, the show page, if you go to the bottom, you can see a whole series of short clips interviewing them, and shows them in practice, shows them actually out there spray painting and working away. So
Larry,
that's
there was a
it.
question. Well, there was a question.
Okay.
Sorry, somebody joined late and he missed the
Yes.
beginning of the talk. Did they
Okay.
start off as street artists and now have shown in galleries and museums? He never heard of them.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
very interesting, very whimsical, which is a word I
Yes.
didn't hear, whimsical. Yeah.
Whimsical is the word for it. They are um they're huge. They are doing these projects all over the world. They have had shows in museums, and this show at the Hirshhorn is a big one. They show in a gallery in New York, and the name of the gallery is slipping past my brain right now. I've had it here someplace, but um, basically, um, I think it might be Malpin. Well, I'm not going to even say. They
Okay.
they do they do show in a gallery in New York, and they just had a show that came down, I believe, before this show went up down in DC.
Okay, so
So
they were street
yes,
artists for sure. That's how they started out.
they
In
started
say
out as street
Sao
artists.
Paulo.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'll tell you, this was an interesting group. I enjoyed looking at them. I really liked the stuff, and that stuff on the silos. I mean, that was just
Yeah.
unbelievable. A lot of it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really looked a lot better than looking at silos. I'll tell you that for sure. Okay, thanks,
All
Larry.
right.
All right, have
Okay.
a nice weekend, everyone, and I hope to see you on October 8th for the disaster preparedness course. Oh, somebody else liked them too. Ooh, really good. This disaster preparedness course, please register on our website, which is chappaqua.library.org. Good to see you all. See you again. Bye-bye.